Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Antonia, and here on this channel I discuss everything fiber arts, knitting, and today I have to share with you guys the third episode of my knitting journal or knitting podcast that I post about all of my ongoing projects, finished objects, and new yarn acquisitions. It's kind of been a while, but I don't have as many finished objects or whips that I expected to be able to share at this point. But I do find that a few of them are pretty cool or pretty big milestones that I wanted to share, so I figured I might as well just post an update. First, to start off with what I'm wearing today, this is my Agnete cardigan that I posted as a finished object, I think, in my first episode. I knitted this up with the Sandnes Garn Tin Pure Gint and Tin Silk Mohair, I believe. I chose two kind of beige light cream colorways to go with it. And I knitted this up in a size medium because I wanted a really oversized kind of look for it. Normally in petite knit patterns, I'm an extra small or a small, so this was kind of like sizing up one or two entire sizes. And I just kind of wanted that really balloony brioche stitch look with this once it was blocked out, and I feel like I totally achieved that. It's the coziest thing ever. It's finally started actually snowing where I live, so it's actually cozy cardigan wearing season, and I can actually wear this inside without overheating, so I'm super happy to finally be busting this out of my closet after all the months that it took for me to finish this, because I do feel like this took me, I think I started it in June and I must have finished it in November. So that for me is, and for a lot of people, is a pretty long-term project. So glad it's over. It's got these beautiful shell kind of mother of pearl or abalone shells, and I just love how it came together. I wouldn't change a single thing about it, except for maybe how much time it took for me to finish it, but that's on me. Now getting into some of my finished objects since my last episode, the elephant in the room that I'd like to address is that I finally finished my Moby sweater, and it is absolutely perfect and I love it. Here's kind of the overall structure I've got going. It's in this medium gray kind of heathered mix color, and I think it's such a good staple color that can go with a lot of stuff. I've been kind of trying to stray away from making everything beige, and as such I went through another period where I knitted everything in gray, so this is probably going to be my final gray project for at least a little while until I can incorporate some more color into my wardrobe. But I'm absolutely in love with this and the way it fits. For this one as well, I did size up to a medium just because some people I had seen online were talking about how they were wanting kind of a more loose or oversized fit, and especially maybe in the arms or in like under where the armpits join for the body, it was not fitting the way that they expected based on the pattern photos. So some people recommended that I size up for this, and I'm so glad I did. I didn't size up in terms of needle size, but this wool that I did use is the Patons classic wool worsted wool that you can get at Michael's. I think that it's the only 100% wool yarn that exists, at least where I am at Michael's. So I've made a few garments out of it so far just because it's so accessible to go, and especially when Michael's has a huge sale, you can pick up a sweater quantity for a really good deal. And in terms of feel and longevity, it produces quite a dense fabric. This is definitely not as airy or open of a knit as some other people I've seen who've made the Moby in the past, but I do think that the fabric, despite being dense, still has really good drape. So I do still come back to making garments out of this yarn just because it's reliable. It's reliable, and it gives you a good kind of final fabric in the end. And it does keep me very warm. It's not too itchy either, even though this neck does touch my bare skin up here. I don't find it too itchy. I usually just wear a tank top under this because I wear everything under my hand knits, or a t-shirt sometimes. But I don't need to do the full long sleeve underlayer underneath this one. When I do block it, I don't use wool wash. If I'm blocking anything, I'll typically just use water, but for this one I did try putting a little bit of hair conditioner in. My mom recommended trying that, and I had never done that before, and I was kind of scared, so I only put like a little bit. But I guess the idea makes sense that if it's designed to soften human hair in the shower. I guess it could also soften sheep hair in my sweater. So it's a pretty soft for 100% wool from Michaels as a result, and I absolutely love it. I do still have an entire ball left over of this, so I guess I can kind of show you guys that this is what it looks like. This one is Dark Gray Mix, is the color name. And I do think that Patons has a classic wool that is not worsted that I've seen for sale online, but I've only ever seen classic wool worsted actually being sold in stores, so I don't know where the regular classic wool can be found. It looks like they have a lot more colors available online as well, but the reason why I buy this one is because it's so easy to just pick up in person, so I wouldn't really go through the effort of buying this one online personally. But yeah, I'm so glad to finally be done this. I've been wearing it non-stop since I finished it. This yarn does pill a little bit compared to, for example, my Ignite that I've also been wearing non-stop since I finished it. This one does pill a little bit more, to be totally honest about the performance of it. This is on the inside, by the way, so this is kind of where the hem touches the back of my jeans and stuff when I'm wearing it. On the outside, it is not really as pilled, but I don't depill my stuff for these videos because, first of all, I can't be bothered, and second of all, I think it's more realistic to see how my knits are actually performing as I wear them. But yeah, nothing a bit of depilling can't fix. It's a little bit annoying, but I definitely think that's also a bit of a symptom of not using a mohair with this when you're knitting it up. Since this is already a worsted weight yarn, it's not super thick, but it's definitely a little bit thicker than the DK weight that's usually recommended for this garment and this pattern. I think if I added a mohair to this for helping with the pilling or just for getting a bit of a halo, it would cause some issues for gauge and sizing. So yeah, maybe for a Aran or bulkier weight knit, that would be a good option, but maybe not for this pattern in particular. And I also think that if I had used mohair in this pattern, then I think the original does call for using a mohair, but just something about it already being a kind of medium dark color and already having this heathered kind of mixed texture to it, I think it might have sacrificed some of the definition in the stitches and in the cables and all this lattice work. So I think overall, I'm glad that I did this one without a mohair. But if I ever did knit it again, I would probably do a lighter color one that is a more open knit and with a mohair in it so that I can kind of have that halo, but it's a light enough color that you can still see the texture. But at this stage in my knitting life, I don't know if I have enough mental energy to even reknit anything, no matter how much I love this, because there's so many other things I want to make that I feel like there just isn't enough time in my life to do everything I want to do. But yeah, love this. It was a long time coming. I'm so glad it's over and it turned out amazing. So huge win, which is kind of strange going into the next thing. So don't laugh, but these are my finished penny gloves. I'm technically counting these as a finished object because there's no more actual knitting that I have to do for these. Obviously, I need to weave in a lot of ends and do some tidying up of these, but I can explain. Basically, I think I showed as a whip in my last video, I had one glove of these completely done, and I knitted it a lot longer than the pattern had recommended. I think they're only supposed to be around this long when they're actually made to size, but I was knitting these when I was on a flight, and I just kind of, I don't think I even had a measuring tape with me at the time, so I couldn't check how long that the sleeve had become before I started doing like the thumb gusset and everything. So I knit them longer than they're supposed to be, and I thought, well, that's fine. I kind of want gloves that go farther up my wrist, but I didn't even think that I might run out of yarn. So that is exactly what happened on my second glove. I don't remember at this point which one was the first one and which one was the second one, but I got to about this part in the construction. It is bottom up, so I only had maybe this much left of the actual glove and then that tiny like centimeter of the sleeve, and I ran out and I was like, I really don't want to buy another skein of this, because that was the whole point, is that I only wanted to buy one ball and then have it be like a single skein project. By the way, this is the Knitting for Olive Merino, fingering weight Merino in the color Plum Rose. I don't think I have the label for this anymore, but I can double check my receipt and I'll update it if it's not that. But it's a lovely kind of medium puttyish, warm, dusty pink. I think it's really pretty. But even though it's really pretty, I didn't want to buy a whole other ball just to knit 1 centimeter or a couple centimeters of a glove. So I committed yarn surgery and I cut into both of them so that they could be equal lengths at that point. I cut into both of them in kind of the same spot in the middle, and I unraveled about this much on each and then used that to finish the glove, and then I Kitchener stitched them back up together. My problem is that the tensioning in my Kitchener stitch was kind of whack, which is why we have kind of like these artifacts. You can see exactly where I surgeried them together. And then also, I have never committed a yarn surgery. I've never done yarn surgery before, so I don't really know how to like finish up the last little bit. So that looks very bad, and it's technically not done. I wouldn't consider this like the last state of this as a finished object, but I just really wanted to include this in the finished objects. I don't have to talk about this one anymore. This one, I think this was the second one that I grafted back together. You can really tell that if I blocked these out, like that little line kind of where they're seamed together or where the graft goes together is not as noticeable, but I just, where the 2 stitches, like where you have to connect them both seamlessly, I don't know. My brain just wasn't understanding it. It was like 3 a.m. I was like 3 episodes of Gilmore Girls deep, and I could no longer deal with it anymore. So I just kind of got these to a stage where I'm like, this is pretty much done. I don't have any more stitches that I technically have to knit. So boom, my penny gloves, Knitting for Olive, fingering weight Merino are finished, quote unquote finished. I'll probably put a finalized, maybe not as a finished object, but as kind of an update. I'll show these once I finally cure them of their yarn surgery complications. I have faith that I'm going to be able to do it, but it might take a while for me to actually get around to it because I'm kind of fed up with these right now. So after that Moby sweater win, I have a little bit of a Penny Gloves L, which is kind of funny considering the difficulty difference between the patterns, but you win some, you lose some. As a side note about the Penny Gloves, one of my friends was recently asking if I could teach her how to knit, and of course I'm like, yes, let me give you the whole rundown. And I'm a huge believer in the whole, don't make someone knit a scarf or a dishcloth as their first project because they're probably just going to be kind of bored the whole time, and if the final object isn't something that they're really passionate about having and owning as a final thing, then it's difficult to keep people motivated for learning something, especially when it's as tedious as knitting can be in the first place. Obviously, once you've been knitting a while, you could knock out a dishcloth or a scarf or a glove set or something in one day, but when it takes you like a month or 2 or longer to finish a single thing and you don't even really like it that much at the end, and each stitch takes like 10 seconds to do one single stitch, obviously it can be hard to stay motivated. So I showed my friend my repository of all the patterns that I've bought over the years, and I said, is there anything here that you kind of like or want to do? And there's stuff in there like the Sophie scarf. That's a little bit more simple, but she looked at the penny gloves and she's like, I want to make these. Do you think I can make these? And I was like, I think maybe you could, but there's like a few techniques in here that are a little bit more difficult than you might expect just looking at it straight ahead. And my first thing that came to mind was the magic loop, because even myself, it took me a while to get used to doing magic loop to make socks and gloves and stuff and sleeves. I used to always just use double pointed needles because I was afraid of the magic loop. But I also didn't want to ask her to buy double pointed needles for this because as a beginning project, you're probably not going to use them that much. And I'm just a huge magic loop truther. I don't hate double pointed needles, but I think you can just accomplish pretty much everything by doing magic loop. And then you can use the same needle set for everything. It's just so versatile. So I wanted to get her on magic loop. And when I helped her cast on the first glove, I said, Okay, well let me know when you start the second one because I can help you start the magic loop, because that's kind of the hardest part. And then a couple days later, she texted me that she had to restart the first glove, but that she restarted it all by herself. And I looked at it in the picture she sent me, and her gauge was so good. Like her tensioning was really nice. Like her stitches were nice and very uniform. Like the purl row, purling is tough to learn, especially when it's just the first row on the pattern is purling. Spoiler alert, but I was very impressed, especially that she started the whole magic loop by herself. Maybe if I find it, I'll put the picture here, but super great. Okay, so those are actually the only two finished objects that I have for right now. I have a couple other whips and then just one single skein of yarn that I bought recently. I'm kind of trying to balance the less interesting projects with the more interesting ones in between. So my big ongoing whip is actually my Celeste sweater. Dun dun dun. So in my last episode, I posted that I had just received the yarn I ordered for this in the mail, and I started working on it only a couple days after I received it in the mail. I think I really sprinted to finish my Moby so that I could feel non-guilty about casting this on. But here's how it's looking. Here's kind of a better view of the exact colors that I'm using. Please let me know in the comments if my color work tension sucks. I need some brutal honesty sometimes, but I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. The colors that I chose for this is basically a main color is this warm brown, and then I've got a beige in there as also kind of another neutral, and then I've got a baby blue and a deep sea green and a nice golden yellow color as kind of a pop. And as much as these colors kind of are fighting in some ways, I think that when you put them all together, it looks kind of nice. And I feel like they were kind of meant to go together like this. So I'm very happy with my color choices. I'm usually so stressed out for color work, Fair Isle, patterns, picking the colors, because not only does the color have to be a nice color on its own, it also has to go nice with all the other colors that you're using in the garment. So my Google Doc of putting the pictures of all of the different icons on the yarn ordering website definitely paid off because it looks exactly the way I imagined it would. My progress on this one is that I'm actually doing the ribbing at the bottom of the body. I think I might put it on pause for a second and then finish the sleeves first. Not that I think I'm going to run out of yarn, but I had the fear instilled in me that I may run out of yarn for any project because when I posted that I had bound off the bottom of my Moby sweater before starting the sleeves, and I posted about it online, someone commented that I was brave for not finishing the sleeves before finishing the body completely, and I figured that actually makes sense because if I had to sacrifice a couple of centimeters on the hem to make sure that my sleeves actually go to my wrists on both of them, I would definitely not risk that, and I would make that sacrifice. One thing about the pattern for this is that I was watching Handmade by Florence's video from a month or two ago when she was making this, and on the back where the pattern meets in the middle, you get kind of like a jog where the pattern is mismatched by knitting it in the round. And I was wanting to find a way to make a jogless Fair Isle at the section where it joins, and I used a technique at first where you just knit into the stitch below at the end of every round, and it looked okay for a while, but then I realized after doing probably this much of it that it's just a brioche. It's just a brioche knit or a half fisherman's rib knit stitch. So it has kind of like a puffiness and a stretched outness of the stitch underneath that you can see. I took a picture before I unraveled it, so maybe I'll put that up. But it just didn't look as seamless as I thought it would, because sure, I avoided the jog, but I also made it more noticeable in another way, so that was kind of bumming me out. I ideally really wanted to make the jog less noticeable because I didn't really like the way that it looked in the back, and the only other color work sweater I have right now is a cardigan, so there is no jog because it's obviously open in the middle. So I unraveled the whole thing and I started the yoke again. And this time I used a different technique where I'll post a link in the description for the tutorial I used. Okay, essentially for this technique, at the last stitch of the round, you do knit into the stitch and the stitch underneath like a brioche stitch, or like a half fisherman stitch, like you would on the previous method that I mentioned. But then you also pass that yarn back onto the left needle, and then you knit it a second time essentially with the first color of the next round. So the way that this kind of worked out in my head is that it's kind of like when you're crocheting and you want to crochet in a way that kind of does it stepwise like this instead of just being a continuous spiral, is you do that thing where you chain 1 or 2 and then you, depending on what stitch you're doing, and then you continue around in the round and then slip back into that stitch at the end. So I feel like the first stitch into the stitch below is kind of like the slip stitch, but then since you're knitting 2 of those stitches every round, you still have the same number of stitches that are being created per round, if that makes sense, instead of having the last stitch of every round be stretched over 2 rounds worth. Let me know if any of that makes sense coming out of my brain. I find it kind of hard to articulate this concept. The video tutorial that I saw about this made a ton of sense, and holding it up to the screen right now, I know you can still see where the join is and it's a little bit funky, but that's also because the inside of this has all the floats going around. The tension is the only issue that I have there, so there's all these untacked down floats, and I think once I kind of weave all those floats in and fasten them down and then block it, I do believe that it made the jogless pretty much. The only part where I could see that there is a jog is at the very start, since I guess that's kind of where the whole thing starts. I wasn't sure if there was a kind of setup round that I had to do for the technique, but apart from that, I'll update you guys when this whole thing is actually finished and blocked. But I think that this technique is my personal favorite winner for making color work be kind of jogless when you're working it in the round. And it's also kind of fun to get to the end of the round and do the whole repeat where you knit into the one underneath and then you pass it back over and you have to see what the next color of the next round is and use that one and attach it. It's pretty engaging and interesting, honestly. So yeah, that's my main update for this one. Obviously a lot of progress has been made despite me restarting it a bunch, but super happy with how it's turning out so far. I forgot to mention I'm making this in Drops Lima. All of the colors are Drops Lima. I bought it off Wool Warehouse when they were having their alpaca sale a while back, so it's very soft so far. I'm really interested to see how it'll block out with the alpaca content, so I'm not making it too long. I'm almost making it a little shorter than the pattern recommends because I'm expecting it to be stretched down a bit, but very happy with how this is coming out so far. My final whip for now is that I'm just making some Sunde socks from Petiteknit in this black Kroy sock that I had in stash. Now, don't say that last episode I said I was never making anything or never buying Kroy sock again, because I didn't buy Kroy sock. This was just what I had in stash and I wanted to get rid of it before starting new socks. But it's kind of hard to see since it's black, but it's just a normal ribbed sock, and normally I do kind of a like slip stitch. They're made top down, obviously, you can see where I'm working, but I normally do like a slip stitch heel, but this one called for just stockinette, and I thought maybe it would look nice, and this yarn is pretty hard wearing, so I don't think that I need the extra reinforcement for it anyway, so I figured I would just go with what the pattern said. And obviously, since this is Kroy sock and it's absolutely not a DK-ish weight yarn, I did kind of alter the pattern so that this could be made up with 2.5mm needles instead of 4mm needles. So it does give a different final feel of the fabric, and it's a pretty different gauge, but I still like the look of the pattern and how the ribbing can kind of scrunch down, almost like a leg warmer kind of look when you wear them with sneakers. So I wanted to knit some long ribbed socks, and this is the first one. The only reason why I'm kind of stressed is because I'm also kind of playing yarn chicken with this. I have, I guess, that much more of the foot to go, and this is all that I have left of my ball for that sock. Obviously I have a second ball, but I don't know if this is an entire foot, like it's kind of transparent. So I don't know if this is a rest of the foot worth of yarn. And after the whole yarn surgery debacle I just experienced with my penny gloves, I don't know if my heart can handle running out of yarn with like this much to the end. Honestly, at that point, I might just make one sock shorter than the other. Or I might use a little tiny bit of my extra gray that I had from the gray Kroy socks that I finished for the petal drop socks a few months ago. But I don't really want them to have a different colored toe. We'll see how I cross that bridge when I get there. But yeah, this is just a kind of simple, small project to have on the needles while I have the huge Celeste sweater ongoing. Those are the only whips that I have going on right now, but I do have one single yarn acquisition to mention. I stopped by one of my local yarn stores and I did buy some Cascade Heritage sock yarn because I think I mentioned last time that I wanted to branch out trying different kinds of sock yarn because I just get in the rut of buying Patons Kroy sock and making all my socks out of that. Not that I dislike it as a yarn, but I would really like to know how different sock yarns wear, and it's such an easy project to buy a single skein for, and then you wear them all the time. You can see how they wear and how they feel. So I got this lovely kind of light pink, baby pink kind of color. I think this color is, when you scan it, it's comes up as strawberry milk or strawberry milkshake or something, but the color number is number 5648 on the label. It doesn't have the name on the label. But I'm really excited to try this. It feels a lot softer to the touch than Kroy sock does. Kroy sock has always felt a little bit toothy and rustic, but not in a terrible way, but just in a feeling that, yeah, these socks are going to be fine if I wear them in my docks and stuff. But this one just feels quite soft to the point that I almost don't believe that it's 75% superwash merino wool and 25% nylon because it's almost too soft, but I believe them. I'm also excited to be, I've never used superwash yarn before, so I'm excited to have especially lighter colored socks that are superwash so I can just chuck them in the wash whenever they need to be cleaned instead of having to carefully hand wash them. So yeah, I think I'm gonna be making a kind of more lacy or cabled sock with this just because I think the pink is so dainty and I think it would be fun to have a nice pair of dainty pink lace socks that I could wear maybe with like a frilled edge or something. Would be super girly. I'm not sure exactly which sock pattern I'm going to use for this, but overall it's a pretty affordable sock yarn as well, and maybe in the future I can splurge on some hand-dyed stuff. But this is the next step after Kroy sock, and then we'll get on some hand-dyed stuff next. Those are all of the updates that I have to share for this time around. I'll put all the details for all of the patterns that I've mentioned and all of the colors, if I didn't mention it, for the yarns that I have for my projects down, as well as my Ravelry will be in the description box. And I do plan on filming a everything I knit in 2023 kind of video now that I've actually been able to recount and list everything that I made this year. And ideally I'd kind of want it to be like a try-on thing where I can talk about how everything fits and what I would have changed about it if I was making it again. So we're going to see if I can round up everything I've made and kind of get that out in the world before it's too far into 2024. So that might be coming soon. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!